The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. So go the opening lines of H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, one of the most famous pieces of cosmic horror fiction ever written, by the man who would posthumously popularise the subgenre. As time lumbers onward, rather impolitely I must add, through the 100-year anniversary period of Lovecraft's golden age in the 1920s and 30s, it's hard not to look back on how far the genre's come. H.P. Lovecraft can be a hard read today because of his, even for the time, extreme xenophobia, but that doesn't lessen the fact he had a way with words, and it's also no surprise that he's found such an audience beyond the borders of his narrow worldview, because there is something universal to his themes of social isolation and existential dread. Cosmic horror overall has moved beyond him, unless you're looking at Cthulhu mythos tales in the style of a revisionist western, where Lovecraft and his prejudices are interrogated and torn apart under intense scrutiny, which comes with its own set of problems. By shoving the indescribable horrors in the audience's face, there's a real risk of coming off as sensationalist or exploitative, but in the right hands, it can provide an experience as moving as Lovecraft at his best, if not better. Hey everyone, I just played Call of the Sea, and it was bittersweet. Developed by Out of the Blue Games and published by Raw Fury, Call of the Sea tells the story of Nora Everhart, a sickly woman searching for her husband Harry, who disappeared along with the rest of his expedition on a mysterious island in the Pacific Ocean while searching for a cure for her illness. It's a classic Lovecraftian tale that will be instantly recognisable to anyone familiar with the genre. It's got the strange old ruins and cursed artifacts. It's got the doomed expedition. It's got the secrets no person was ever meant to know. But with one key difference. Call of the Sea flips the horror on its head. Instead of a story of Lovecraftian terror, this is a tale of cosmic romance. So let's talk about it. But before I get my hands into the guts of this game, there are going to be mild puzzle spoilers throughout the video, and Call of the Sea is a game best played blind anyway, so if anything I've said has piqued your interest, please go play it and then come right on back. I'll still be here when you're done. I'll put a proper spoiler break when we get into the really spicy stuff later in the video though. Also, this video and everything I make for the channel is now made possible by the generous people supporting me on Patreon. I don't make money off ads and I don't take sponsors, so if you like what I do and want to see more, please consider donating. And if you can't support monthly or just don't want to give Patreon money, Ko-Fi is also an option. But if financial support isn't possible and you still want to help the channel out, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video around because YouTube sure won't. Links are in the description. Anyway, let's get to it. This is Call of the Sea. Despite having a reputation for refusing to describe his unknowable horrors, H.P. Lovecraft was very good at building a mood through his descriptions of ancient ruins and starless nights, so it only makes sense that Call of the Sea paints just as vivid a picture with its visual style. The island on which the game is set looks gorgeous, from the dense green jungles of the coast to the abandoned village on the cusp of sunset to the ship wrecked upon the rocks in the middle of a storm. The vibrant colours pop off the screen, and it's helped a lot by the lighting. You can feel the warmth of the setting sun through the trees and the damp chill of mountain fog. There are some absolutely incredible vistas to be found in this game, and it's also tactile, like you could just reach through the screen and touch it. The presence of Pacific birds and fish make the island feel alive and normal. The clutter left by the expedition gives a real sense of journey and hardship too. How could anywhere this lovely be so dangerous? It's a real rejection of the usual gloomy green Lovecraftian style, and it all serves to only widen the divide between the picturesque scenery and the classic cosmic horror plot befalling the expedition. Everything might be slightly stylized, in a similar way to the Dishonored games, but that's what allows the three-dimensional environments and the two-dimensional photographs, skyboxes, and loading screens to feel like one consistent world. So when you do come across a moment of genuine horror, like the wreck of the Lady Shannon covered in enormous claw marks, it is actually shocking. Something as simple as the contrast between two photographs, one from the beginning of the expedition, one from its end, was enough to send a chill up my spine in Call of the Sea, whereas if it were in a work of cosmic horror with a more classically Lovecraftian visual style, I don't think something like that would even stick out. The visuals also allow for the game's weirder environments to uphold the suspension of disbelief a little better than a more photorealistic game might. The diamond shape looming out of the centre of the island that you can see from near about everywhere you go just wouldn't look right rendered realistically. It needs that little bit of abstraction and exaggeration to make the strange geometries really pop. It's the same with the fish statues all over the place, and the puzzle elements. It's something you don't even really notice until you come across a more familiar environment either, like the ship's cabin from the prologue, which actually do stress the suspension of disbelief a bit in the odd little ways they are abstracted. But given that only serves to support the game's themes, it's certainly not a criticism. Unfortunately, I do think Call of the Sea slides back into the classic gloomy Lovecraftian horror game visual style in its final chapter. There are still some beautiful sights to see at the end of the game, but the dull grey stones of the Sanctuary Temple just can't compare to the bright and colourful tableaus on offer everywhere else. Even the wreck of the Lady Shannon played around with lighting. The final area just felt a bit basic to look at by comparison. Call of the Sea also struggles a bit with character models, to the point there are basically none. The only person so much as glimpsed in the third dimension is Nora herself, and even then, you only see her hands. Everyone else either appears out of Nora's line of sight or through two-dimensional flashbacks, which is fine because I do prefer that style for them. Everyone has a very distinct silhouette. It's impossible to mistake one person for another in the photographs and the flashbacks, even as the horrors of the expedition take their toll, and I don't know if those outlines would have translated well to 3D space. I already feel some of Nora's characterization is lost just by occasionally seeing her hands interact with things, even if they are modelled and textured just as well as everything else in the game. Otherwise, my issues with the visuals are mostly nitpicks. There's some slowdown, as you'll probably notice throughout the video, and sometimes you can see out of bounds under choppy water or inside cables, though that was something I only really noticed while editing the video, so it's not a huge issue. The sound design more than makes up for it though. Cissy Jones and Yuri Lowenthal knocked it out of the park as Nora and Harry. They take the spark of romance already present in the writing and turn it into something deeper, a fire maintained through years of love and devotion for one another. They don't just come off as a married couple, they seem like genuine friends with years of history and in-jokes and an intimate understanding of themselves as people.
Harry said that he would go to the end of the world to find a cure. And by the looks of it, he wasn't lying. We promised we'd never lie to each other from the moment we started dating, no matter how harsh the truth.
My dear old pal, I know you won't ever read this letter, but I'm accustomed to writing you and it comforts me in this strange place. This island is riddled with secrets. So many secrets. But I'm not only talking about mechanisms and contraptions, Nora.
Oh dear. Oh, I'm sorry, but art has never been your thing, old pal.
We may have made some progress in finding the cure for your illness, but at what price? I miss you so much, Nora. Harry.
He may not say it explicitly, but Harry blames himself for death. I know him too well. And I miss you too, Harry.
Even I can feel how I am constantly assaulted by dark thoughts. Anyway, if what I am going through here helps me find you a cure, it'll have been worth it. I hope to find an answer in the temple on that mountain peak. Love you always, Harry.
The happiest day of my life And one of the few pictures of Harry without his glasses.
I love you, Nora.
And I love you, Harry.
The other voice actors do a good job too.
Let me record it. So, you said you've been on this island before?
Yes. Some years ago. I made a rookie mistake. I detoed from my fishing route to go to what looked like a better spot.
I especially like Stephen Hughes as Captain Hodgson.
Pardon me, madam, but the island is in sight. We'll be lowering the boat in just a minute.
But it's Lowenfall and especially Jones who get the lion's share of the dialogue, and together they really carry the plot. It's through their performances that Call of the Sea isn't all doom and gloom, that there's still love and laughter to be found amongst the madness. I do think a couple of line reads don't really match the tone. At one point Nora discovers the grave of one of the expeditioners, and she sounds like she just learned her favourite side character from a book or TV show got killed off.
Oh no! Died.
But otherwise, it's stellar work. The music is great too. Eduardo de la Iglesia managed to find the perfect balance between otherworldly mystery and human romance. There were some tracks that reminded me of John Williams at his best. It really tugged at the heartstrings. The only audio issues that really come to mind are the little click selecting options in the menu makes. For some reason it just gets under my skin and makes me irrationally angry. Maybe because it's so loud, or it's just the same noise over and over and over. And also, sometimes lines of dialogue are cut a little too close together, like the engineer didn't leave enough space for a natural pause. But hey, let he who is without sin on that front cast the first stone. Otherwise though, it was really good. All the machinery and puzzle elements sound tactile. All the ambience and the weather has a pleasing natural flow, even when it's violent.
Now, what exactly did I turn on? Where did you get this strange device, Harry? A miniature va'a, a Polynesian outrigger canoe. Beautifully crafted, too.
and the underwater stuff is some of the best I've ever heard. It all adds to the sense that this island existed long before Harry's expedition first rocked up, and makes it an absolute joy to explore. I've seen Call of the Sea criticised in some reviews for Nora's slow movement speed, and the game also has the walking simulator tag on Steam, but I'm sorry to say I think people who approach the experience as something to be rushed through and beaten are playing it wrong. It's not like the game contains huge sprawling areas that take forever to traverse. Every chapter is densely packed with puzzles and story content and shortcuts that allow you to loop back to earlier points of interest. And indeed, Nora is a woman with a chronic illness who has only recently found the strength to walk without the aid of a cane. She's not going to be running marathons all over the island in her search for Harry. The movement speed feels like a very deliberate choice. It's quick enough to get you where you need to go, but not so fast that you'll miss important information like a puzzle piece or a bit of story. Call of the Sea wants you to take your time, to actually exist in this world, and to think about what it's showing you, to dread what horrible tragedy befell the expedition might be waiting around the nearest corner, as much as imagine the next mountain view or sunset-soaked horizon, because a lot of it is mechanically important. Beyond exploration, Call of the Sea's biggest focus is on puzzles, and it's only by thoroughly exploring each environment that you come across hints on how to solve them. They don't make it easy either. The first couple of chapters feature puzzles that aren't too challenging, but the second you reach the Lady Shannon, the gloves come off. Balancing these blobs of black ooze is a wicked trick, and the big set-piece puzzle that ends the chapter is even more complex. Even before you reach them, there are a couple of brain ticklers that require a little lateral thinking. Getting the bridge down at the end of the first chapter requires you to find a set of symbols placed around the map in order to figure out the order. And it took me a moment to realise it was the altitudes of the symbols etched onto the boards that was part of the answer rather than the shape of the board itself. A lot of the puzzles are like that. The hints are obvious when you know the solutions, but seem inscrutable and convoluted upon first glance, because they're not hints or answers or clues, not really. They're more like extra pieces of the puzzle you're trying to solve. I think it's telling that when Nora jots them down in her journal, she does so under a tab labelled notes, because that's all they really are. It's entirely up to the player to figure out how they fit together. I do really appreciate the whole journal mechanic too, whether it's taking notes or filling in story with the log. Once you find anything important, you've got it for good, so there's no need to go rushing back and forth across the map like a headless chicken to double check things. And if there's an obvious gap on the page, it's a dead giveaway that you've missed a clue along the way, a mistake you wouldn't catch if you were writing them down with a pad and pen yourself. Though sometimes even if you do find all the notes, it only makes things more confusing. Probably the most infamous example of this is the puzzle at the end of chapter 4, which, even now, knowing the answer and how to solve it, I don't know how to describe. It's like you need to translate the murals on the walls to open the doors by matching them to the symbols, and then the wheels spin the diamonds around the starbursts to change their overall orientation. So this symbol means that, and that symbol means this, and on and on. With some careful consideration, you know what, maybe we don't need to find out what happened to the expedition. I think they're kind of... And then, so you take the symbols, and you spin the diamonds, and the murals are there, and then all I really have left to say is Purple Monkey Dishwasher. This puzzle might be a cognitive hazard. The more I try to think it through, the less I understand it. It's like trying to hold on to the memory of a dream once you wake up, but I swear it made sense to me when I solved it. This was actually the only puzzle I looked up during my first playthrough several years back, because I was so fucking stuck, and so fucking sick of this chamber, and just wanted to move on with the story. But when I came back to the game to make this video, I was determined to figure it out myself, to make it make sense. And I did, and now the solution's gone. Is this what it feels like to go mad from the knowledge man was never meant to have? It's so hard, not even the characters in the story itself figured it out. They had to find another way through to the other side of the door. It is the exception though. The rest of the puzzles were intuitive enough that I could put them together after a few minutes of mulling it over, and because the puzzles are pretty challenging most of the time, it feels great to solve them. Aside from notes about the puzzles, exploring the environment and inspecting every bit of interactive scenery will net you log entries in Nora's journal, which provide greater insight into Nora's own thoughts regarding the whole situation, and when taken as a whole, read pretty close to one of Lovecraft's classic originals. Honestly though, I think the log entries are just a bonus. In Call of the Sea, exploration is its own reward. There are a ton of little extras to find all over the game, some of them tongue-in-cheek fourth wall-breaking references, others in-universe nods to other classics of the genre, even a couple of sneak peeks at Out of the Blue's other projects. They hid the announcement of their second game, American Arcadia, in the final puzzle, and now coming back to Call of the Sea with the knowledge that there's a sequel in the works, it wasn't hard to find a few hanging threads for Call of the Elder Gods to pick up too. None of these extras add any sort of mechanical depth or complexity to the game, they are just secrets to find, but they do give you even more reason to look around if you're invested in the story, and even if you don't, there's still a lot of stuff to inspect all over the island, so it certainly doesn't feel empty. Unfortunately, if you're not interested in really hard puzzles or a really good story, then I don't think Call of the Sea will be your sort of thing. The mechanics work for what they are and serve the story well, but they're not that deep, to the point that I've kind of exhausted everything I have to say about them already. Ironic, I know, given the title. Fingers crossed Call of the Elder Gods adds in a bit more mechanical complexity, though if you're a tabletop game enjoyer, there's also a recently crowdfunded Call of Cthulhu module based on Call of the Sea on its way, which will presumably, add in some depth to the gameplay. It also promises to switch the story around a little. Instead of Nora following in the footsteps of the expedition, she's there from the very beginning, and in good tabletop game fashion, there's a chance you might be able to get everyone back home alive. But I don't know. I can't play it since it's not out, and I probably never will. Not because I don't want to, but because half of my tabletop group isn't interested in horror games, and like every D&D team, we barely ever play the things we do agree on anyway. It happened again while I was making this video. You can't win. Scheduling is a Lovecraftian horror that consumes us all. I might get it anyway just for the artwork though. Just toss it on the pile of core rulebooks for systems we'll never play, but who knows. Either way, my point is, if you play games solely for the mechanics, if you agree with those Steam reviews that Nora's too slow, or that walking simulators are a waste of time, Call of the Sea probably isn't for you. There's still hope for Call of the Elder Gods though, and since we're talking about the sequel, Call of the Void was right there, come on. I know it's already the name of a podcast, do it anyway. I do understand why Call of the Sea takes a gentle touch to mechanics though, because wading through what remains of Harry's expedition is very much in keeping with the style and structure of Lovecraft's most famous tales. It's rare that the guy would toss in an action scene or any present tense dialogue. Instead, he built dread through the stuff left behind for the protagonists to find, be that the shredded tents of explorers who met a terrible end, or the ancient ruins once inhabited by inhuman beings from beyond the stars. At the Mountains of Madness is a great example. So much of the present tense plot of that story is just the narrator following a trail of carnage and piecing together what happened. No different from Nora here in Call of the Sea. The picturesque island setting is also a very faithful translation of Lovecraft's vivid descriptive prose from word to image, as I've already said. There's a lot of environmental storytelling going on in Call of the Sea, from the murals covering much of the ruins, to the arrangement of each of the expedition's campsites, and very little of it goes by without a comment from Nora, no different than if she were the narrator of a Lovecraft original. For example, at the first camp in the abandoned village, she notes how the expedition's local guide, Teoharoa, slept apart from everyone else if you actually managed to find his hammock, and that sense of isolation from the rest of the group only widens the worse things get for them. With so much narration, the game ran a real risk of leaning hard into tell don't show, but Nora often doesn't have any more information than the player. Her guesses at what the ancient murals mean are just that, and her comments on the remains of the expedition never shove anything in the player's face to make sure they understand what the game is trying to say. It's all very naturalistic and believable, which is finally where Call of the Sea deviates from its literary inspirations. Lovecraft could write about weird geometries and unspeakable horrors like no one else, but his stories often lacked a human element, and especially a feminine perspective. I've often wondered what the Dunwich Horror would look like told from Lavinia Whateley's perspective, or how much harder At the Mountains of Madness would hit if any of the characters had any believable depth to them. But, given the man's oddities and especially his prejudices, I'm also not surprised his writing often ignored those things. Call of the Sea might take the style and structure of a Lovecraftian tale, but its writing is vivid by virtue of its naturalism rather than its descriptiveness. As someone who grew up sick, I felt it in my bones when Nora venomously spat.
My cane. No, I would rather die than use that damned thing again.
As someone who has watched family members waste away from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, I understand Harry's drive to find a cure for Nora at any cost. The two are willing to go to hell for one another, and that's a sort of love Lovecraft himself never wrote about. The game isn't afraid to shine a light on the prejudices of the time either. Frank Drayton, the expedition's black mechanic, is held back in his field by the racism of the American education system. Cassandra Ward, the expedition's journalist and photographer, is overlooked by the trade because she's a woman. And those are just the two most obvious examples. There are more to find if you look hard enough. I do enjoy how the game draws a line between real-life Polynesian culture and fictional Lovecraftian elements too, rather than just blending them together as though it doesn't matter like writers in the 1930s absolutely would have. And not in a nasty way either. Teoharoa doesn't come off as a token Polynesian. He's an active presence in the story, with his own goals and motivations. It's why Call of the Sea feels closer to cosmic romance than cosmic horror, though there are still a lot of scares to be found. They're just drawn more from the known depths humans are willing to sink in order to get what they want, rather than the unknowable horrors from beyond the stars. Describing the indescribable is a fool's errand, so Call of the Sea keeps those classic Lovecraftian elements distant, and instead anchors the horror around the familiar. So when the terrible things you know are coming happen to the expedition, it hits so much harder. You feel each and every loss, each and every argument, and so does Nora. Watching Harry change from a loving husband to a deranged lunatic is heartbreaking. Watching Frank deteriorate from an infected wound across chapters is tragic. Knowing you and Nora are too late to prevent any of it is gut-wrenching. Aside from characterization, a lot of that comes down to the game's pacing as well. You're not on the expedition's trail from start to finish. Nora goes entire chapters on her own, exploring parts of the island Harry and the others never even got to see. The two journeys are braided together in really interesting ways. Sometimes Nora gets off easy, sometimes it's Harry who's able to find a shortcut. It might all be familiar to even casual readers of cosmic horror, but it's refreshed by the unfamiliar lens through which Out of the Blue chose to tackle the story. One aspect of the writing that is definitely a staple of Lovecraftian fiction is the references. Call of the Sea takes place within the Cthulhu mythos, and the game is overflowing with little nods to Lovecraft's body of work. Tillinghast's weird lens machine from Beyond is part of a puzzle. Cassandra D. Ward is herself a take on the title character from the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and many of her articles reference Lovecraft's other stories too. Sometimes it feels like you can't take a step without tripping over a reference.
Never heard of this Eric Sam fella.
But overall, there are two weird tales of Lovecraft's that Call of the Sea is an indirect adaptation of, and given the title, you can probably guess the first. Call of Cthulhu is an obvious inspiration given the Pacific Island setting, and a steamship's unfortunate encounter with a very awake, very angry Cthulhu. But the other inspiration, I think, is best discovered yourself. So if you don't want to learn the island's strangest secrets, go to here. That's Deep One for Send Obed Marsh my regards. The Shadow over Innsmouth is Call of Cthulhu's other main inspiration, and the game is not subtle about it.
What was that? What are those voices?
One thing I do really appreciate about the game is that it expects a familiarity with the classics of the genre from the player, and thus doesn't feel the need to condescend or dance around the big twist. If you already know what's coming, you can figure it out within the first few minutes of the game. Nora's frailty, or so-called Dalmatian spots, aren't the result of some hereditary illness, but a manifestation of her Deep One heritage. When the narrator of Shadow over Innsmouth discovered he too was turning into a fish person like the ones who had pursued him throughout the rest of the story, it was a genuine twist, but it's not one Call of the Sea could ever play straight after almost a century of cosmic horror fiction, so it remains a twist only to Nora, and it takes a shocking amount of time for her to realise the truth, especially to any player familiar with her situation. Then again, denial is a perfectly reasonable response to finding out you're turning into a sea creature, and it's her response that makes the twist still land, even though most players will see it coming several nautical miles away, especially since it means there's no cure. By the logic of the stories that inspired the game, Nora's transformation into a Deep One is inevitable. All the violence and madness suffered by Harry and his expedition was for nothing. If Nora remains on land, she'll die from, I don't know, fish withdrawal, but if she leaves her human life behind, she'll have to leave it all. Survival means forgetting her hometown, Harry, herself.
What is this? This... Oh my god. Did I almost forget about Harry?
It's an impossible choice, one slowly revealed to both Nora and the player as you travel across the island in pursuit of Harry's expedition, following a ritual path to a temple sanctuary where the change can be made permanent. And it's there that Call of the Sea reveals its actual big twist. Nora's Deep One heritage was merely a misdirect. Call of the Sea's true revelation is that Cassandra Ward was evil all along. Wait, what? It doesn't come completely out of nowhere. The island doesn't drive its visitors mad so much as it intensifies them. Harry is already a driven person, so the island drives him to the brink of insanity in an effort to find an impossible cure. Once he realizes the truth of Nora's situation, he decides the only way they can be together is if he turns himself into a Deep One too, using the black ooze bubbling up all over the island to perform the ritual at its heart. But Cassandra's not here out of love. She's here to get the scoop of a lifetime. And what makes for a better story than all the forbidden knowledge in the universe? The problem is, Cassandra Ward is the least fleshed out character in the game, so her suddenly hijacking the plot in its final moments just doesn't feel properly set up. She's obviously important given she makes it all the way to the sanctuary with Harry, the only other member of his doomed expedition to do so, but I don't feel I know her as a character the way I do Frank Drayton or Teo Hiroa. Sure, she's a little confrontational with everyone throughout, and she's the only one still smiling following come the wreck of the Lady Shannon. Given she was hiding a Deep One's ritual blade in a copy of Moby Dick, there's definitely more to her character than the game lets on. And that's probably to imply it's her who sends Nora on her search for Harry at the beginning of the game, but it doesn't serve her sudden turn as an antagonist. But then again, maybe that's the point, because Cassandra Ward is herself a misdirect, a second layer of subterfuge to hide the fact Call of the Sea's true antagonist is in fact Harry Everhart himself. I say antagonist specifically because he's not particularly villainous. Everything he does is done out of love for Nora, with the best of intentions, but that doesn't justify his actions. The game tries to frame him as the aggressor in the final chapter, as though he hurt Cassandra and left her on the steps to find her own way back to civilization while he entered the sanctuary to perform the ritual on himself and become fish. But as I said, the island didn't drive him mad. It simply intensified his personality. Deep down, he understood the ritual wouldn't work. Not on a full-blooded human being such as himself. Only those with the ocean in their veins could survive the ritual, even if irrevocably changed. But Cassandra Ward only had ambition in her heart. So, the ritual rejected her. That was all the proof Harry needed, but he couldn't just return home a failure, without a cure. So he left his glasses behind at Cassandra's side as proof of his demise, and orchestrated Nora's rescue mission to send her down the same path, to learn the truth of her heritage, and her only chance of survival. He lied to her, but it was a line he was willing to cross if it meant saving Nora's life. She would live out the rest of her days as a Deep One, having forgotten him and her life on land, but she would live. I like this twist a lot better than Cassandra Ward's attempt to hijack the climax. Call of the Sea put in the work to set up Nora and Harry both as individuals and a married couple, so his ultimate betrayal cuts deep. It's only because Nora knows him so well that she's able to see through his lie at the last moment. She's still faced with an impossible choice: answer the Call of the Sea and live, or remain on land and die. But it's one she gets to make herself, rather than made for her by Harry. It's his attempt to deny her that freedom of choice which makes him the game's antagonist, and such a tragic one too. The island did get to him in the end, but not with the usual Lovecraftian madness. It turned his love for Nora into a sour thing, made him more obsessed with the how of saving her than the why, and regardless of her ultimate choice, he spends the rest of his long life alone and uncertain of his actions. It's a fitting comeuppance. He definitely deserves a little cosmic justice for his actions, but again, he's not an evil man, and given he'll be back in Call of the Elder Gods, there's a chance he might redeem himself too, but it would have been unsatisfying to let him walk away from the betrayal unscathed. Because Nora only discovers the deception at the very end of the game, the choice of ending is determined by whether you go through one door or another. You can accept Nora's fate, have her shed her skin for scales and join the Deep Ones down in their underwater civilization, hidden away from the surface world. But that ending feels a little unsatisfying to me. After everything the game has put Nora through in her search for Harry, I can't imagine her not returning home. She says it best herself on the boat ride back to Captain Hodgson's ship.
Have you ever been in love, Captain Hodgson?
In love? You mean like in a romance novel?
No, that's fiction, Captain. In real life, true love stories don't end with a wedding. They end with a funeral.
That is who Nora is, the woman who Harry fell in love with. Better to live and love and die as herself than survive beneath the waves as some random Deep One without a personality. Whichever ending you choose, Nora and Harry sing their favourite song over the credits, and if you choose to stay, you'll see them some years later in the accompanying photograph. Nora's condition has clearly worsened, and the duet will be cut short by a coughing fit. But they got 12 more good years together before she passed, and though Harry will live out the rest of his days racked with uncertainty and guilt, she at least got her happy ending with her dear old pal, on her own terms too, a rarity in Lovecraftian fiction. Yo, Thanos worked on this game? Call of the Sea might seem shallow mechanically, but under the surface it tells a deep story of what people are willing to do for the ones they love. It takes the familiar elements of H.P. Lovecraft's most famous tales and twists them from cosmic horror into cosmic romance, in ways that have stayed with me across the years since I first played it. It was a joy to return to, and I'm looking forward to returning to this world once again come the release of Call of the Elder Gods. If you're looking for a fresh take on the Lovecraftian puzzle game, I can't think of one better. Contrary to what H.P. Lovecraft wrote, some voyages from the familiar shores of ignorance and comfort are worth it. Should I hear the Call of the Sea again? I'll happily answer. Thanks for watching. And that's the video. Before I go, I'd like to thank by name the people supporting me with $5 US a month or more on Patreon. Azazel, Cass, Hawkwing2652, Heymatey, Jeffiet, Kim, Marcy May, Operator Error, Paranoid Android, Rough Belly, Samuel Inglis, Sarah Bloomer, Smorsky, Sneezy McGlassface, Space Quest Historian, This Sauerkraut, Tree3 Angry Bees, Ursa, and Zeke the Phantom. Thank you so much. So, I've been wanting to make this video for years, but I didn't expect to be so moved by Call of the Sea again, even knowing every beat of the plot. It's got me thinking I might have to take a look at American Arcadia in the future, but whatever comes next, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Wait, I've got it again. What you need to do is